3 days after the incident, the drunk tourist appeared in Westminster Magistrates' Court for his preliminary hearing. His face was still swollen, and he wore a temporary dental appliance to cover the gap where his tooth had been. He looked considerably different from the cocky aggressor seen in the viral videos. The magistrate reviewed the charges against him: assault on a police officer, drunk and disorderly conduct, and trespassing on royal property. Each charge carried serious penalties, and the combination could result in months of imprisonment and thousands of pounds in fines. His court-appointed solicitor tried to argue that the punch had been excessive force, but the magistrate quickly dismissed this claim after reviewing the video evidence. The defendant clearly initiated physical contact, the magistrate stated firmly. The guard's response was both legal and proportionate to the threat. Media representatives packed the courtroom, eager to cover the conclusion of the story that had captivated international attention. Sketch artists worked frantically to capture the defendant's appearance, since photography was prohibited in the courtroom. The tourist's family had flown in from his home country, looking embarrassed and ashamed of their relative's behavior. His mother sat in the gallery with tears in her eyes, while his father refused to make eye contact with reporters who tried to approach them for comments. During the hearing, prosecutors played the clearest video footage of the incident. The courtroom watched in silence as the drunk man's aggressive behavior escalated from verbal taunts to physical assault. When Michael's perfectly timed counterpunch landed, several people in the gallery audibly gasped. "This case serves as a clear reminder that actions have consequences," the prosecutor stated during her opening remarks. The defendant chose to assault a member of Her Majesty's Royal Guard while intoxicated, and he must face the full consequences of that choice. The defense solicitor had few options available. The video evidence was overwhelming, and dozens of witnesses had provided consistent statements about the incident. His only strategy was to emphasize his client's intoxication and ask for leniency based on his lack of previous criminal record. "My client deeply regrets his actions," the solicitor pleaded. "He was heavily intoxicated and not thinking clearly. He has already suffered significant consequences, including permanent dental damage and public humiliation. We ask the court to consider these factors when determining his sentence." The magistrate was not impressed by this argument. "Intoxication is not an excuse for criminal behavior," she responded sternly. "If anything, it demonstrates poor judgment and a lack of self-control that makes the defendant a danger to public safety." Several character witnesses testified on behalf of the tourist, describing him as normally peaceful and law-abiding. His employer back home had provided a letter stating that he was a reliable worker who had never shown violent tendencies before this incident. However, these testimonials were overshadowed by the clear video evidence of his aggressive behavior toward Michael. The footage showed him escalating the confrontation repeatedly, despite multiple opportunities to walk away peacefully. During a brief recess, reporters gathered outside the courthouse to interview legal experts about the likely outcome. Most predicted that the tourist would receive a suspended sentence and substantial fines, along with a ban from returning to the United Kingdom. Inside the courtroom, the defendant sat silently as his fate was decided. His swollen jaw served as a constant reminder of his foolish decision to attack a trained military professional. He kept touching the gap where his tooth had been, wincing each time. The magistrate announced that she would deliver her sentence after reviewing all the evidence and testimonies. She emphasized that attacks on royal guards would be treated with the utmost seriousness by British courts, regardless of the defendant's nationality or circumstances. As the hearing concluded, the tourist was released on bail pending sentencing. He left the courthouse through a back exit to avoid the media circus waiting outside, but photographers still managed to capture images of his bruised and swollen face. The drunk man's patience finally snapped. "I said look at me when I'm talking to you," he screamed, his face turning red with anger and alcohol. Without warning, he shoved Michael hard in the chest with both hands. The force was unexpected, but Michael barely moved, his years of training keeping him balanced and steady. This physical contact changed everything. According to protocol, Michael was now authorized to respond, but he chose to give the man one chance to back down. "Sir, you need to step away immediately," Michael said in a firm, commanding voice that cut through the tourist's drunken haze. The sudden sound of the guard's voice startled everyone around them. Tourists stopped and stared, their phones still recording the unfolding drama. The drunk man's friends looked nervous for the first time, realizing their friend had crossed a serious line by physically assaulting a royal guard. But instead of backing down, the intoxicated tourist became even more enraged. "Oh, so you can talk," he yelled, spittle flying from his mouth. "I knew you were just pretending to be tough." He took another step forward, invading Michael's personal space completely. Michael could see the man's bloodshot eyes and smell the mixture of alcohol and aggression radiating from him. Years of military service had taught him to read people quickly, and this individual was beyond reasoning with. The tourist was looking for a fight, and nothing Michael could say would de-escalate the situation. "Final warning, sir," Michael stated clearly, ensuring his words would be captured on the numerous phones recording the incident. "Move away from my position now." His voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed, but the drunk man was too far gone to recognize the danger he was in. The tourist laughed mockingly and turned to his friends. "Did you hear that? He thinks he's scary." Then, turning back to Michael with a sneer, he made the biggest mistake of his day. "What are you going to do about it, pretty boy?" Without any further warning, the man drew back his right fist and threw a wild, drunken punch directly at Michael's face. The attack was telegraphed and clumsy, exactly what Michael had expected from someone so intoxicated. Time seemed to slow down as the fist approached. Michael's response was lightning fast and precise. Years of combat training and boxing experience kicked in automatically. He slightly turned his head to avoid the full impact of the punch, then immediately countered with a perfectly executed right cross that connected squarely with the attacker's jaw. The sound of the impact echoed across the courtyard like a gunshot. It was the clean, sharp crack of knuckles meeting bone with tremendous force. Every tourist in the area heard it clearly, and many would later describe it as one of the most satisfying sounds they had ever witnessed. The drunk man's eyes went wide with shock and pain. For a split second he stood frozen, his brain trying to process what had just happened. The cocky grin disappeared from his face, replaced by a look of complete bewilderment and growing agony. Michael immediately returned to his attention position, his face showing no emotion whatsoever. To anyone watching, it appeared as though nothing had happened at all. The guard stood perfectly still once again, his breathing steady and controlled, as if the entire altercation had been just another minor interruption in his day. The crowd around them erupted in gasps and excited chatter. Phone cameras continued rolling, capturing every second of the aftermath. Several tourists began applauding, clearly impressed by the guard's professional handling of the situation. The drunk tourist staggered backward, his hand flying to his jaw as the full impact of Michael's punch registered in his alcohol-clouded brain. Blood began to trickle from the corner of his mouth, and he could feel something loose and sharp rolling around on his tongue. His front tooth had been completely knocked out by the powerful blow. "My tooth," he screamed, spitting blood and enamel fragments onto the pristine palace steps. "He knocked out my tooth." The man looked around frantically, searching the ground for his missing dental work while his friends stood frozen in shock. The other tourists watched in fascination as the aggressor stumbled around, alternately cursing and whimpering about his injury. Some felt sympathy for him, but most seemed to think he had gotten exactly what he deserved for attacking a royal guard. Michael remained motionless at his post, giving no indication that anything unusual had occurred. His training emphasized returning to normal duties immediately after neutralizing a threat. The brief physical altercation was over, and he had resumed his ceremonial responsibilities without missing a beat. The drunk man's friends finally snapped out of their shock and rushed to help him. They found his tooth on the ground, chipped and bloody, and one of them picked it up with a tissue. "We need to get you to a hospital," one friend said nervously, clearly worried about the potential consequences of their friend's actions. "I'm going to sue," the injured tourist shouted through his bloody mouth, his words slurred both by alcohol and his new dental gap. "He can't just hit people. I'm going to own this place!" His threats rang hollow, however, as dozens of witnesses and countless phone recordings clearly showed him attacking the guard first. Palace security finally arrived on the scene, having been alerted by the commotion and the gathering crowd. The head of security, Inspector Williams, quickly assessed the situation by speaking with witnesses and reviewing the phone footage that tourists eagerly shared with him. "Sir, "You're under arrest for assault on a royal guard," Inspector Williams announced to the bleeding tourist. "You have the right to remain silent, and I strongly suggest you exercise that right." The inspector's tone made it clear that he had little sympathy for someone foolish enough to attack one of his guards. The drunk man tried to resist arrest, demanding medical attention and threatening lawsuits. But his friends convinced him to cooperate. They knew their holiday was ruined, and any chance of avoiding serious legal trouble depended on not making the situation worse than it already was. As the security team led the group away, other tourists began approaching Michael with words of support and admiration. "Good for you," an elderly woman said quietly as she passed his position. "That young man needed to learn some respect." Many others nodded in agreement or gave him subtle thumbs-up signs. A group of teenage girls giggled excitedly as they took selfies near Michael's position. "Did you see how fast he was?" one whispered to her friends. "That guy didn't know what hit him." Their commentary was typical of the crowd's reaction. Most people were impressed by the guard's quick reflexes and professional demeanor. Local news reporters began arriving within the hour. Having been tipped off by tourists who had posted videos on social media, the story was already going viral online. With hashtags like Guard Justice and Royal Knockout trending on various platforms, Michael could hear the reporters interviewing witnesses, but he continued to ignore all the attention and focus on his duties. He had been trained to handle media situations by simply maintaining his post and letting official spokespersons deal with questions and statements. Throughout the remainder of his shift, tourists continued to approach his position with newfound respect and curiosity. The incident had transformed him from just another ceremonial guard into a local hero who had stood up to a bully and defended the dignity of his position. Within hours of the incident, videos of the confrontation had spread across every major social media platform. The footage showed the drunk tourist's unprovoked attack and Michael's swift, decisive response. Comment sections exploded with praise for the guard and criticism of the aggressive tourist's behavior. "Don't mess with the Queen's Guard," read one popular comment that received thousands of likes. "This guy learned the hard way that these aren't just decorative soldiers." Another viral comment stated, "Play stupid games, win stupid prizes. Hope his tooth was worth it." News outlets picked up the story quickly, with headlines ranging from "Royal Guard delivers instant justice" to "Tourist gets dental lesson in respect." The incident became a talking point on morning television shows, with hosts and guests debating the appropriateness of the guard's response. Most experts supported Michael's actions, pointing out that royal guards are highly trained military personnel, not costumed actors. A former military officer appearing on BBC explained, "These guards have a duty to protect themselves and maintain order. The tourist committed assault first, and the guard responded with appropriate force." The drunk tourist, meanwhile, was spending his day in a London hospital getting emergency dental work. Doctors informed him that his knocked-out tooth could not be saved due to the damage, and he would need an expensive implant procedure. The medical bills were just the beginning of his problems. His friends had abandoned him at the hospital, catching the first flight back to their home country to avoid any legal complications. They had deleted most of their social media posts about the trip and were hoping to distance themselves from the entire incident. Legal experts weighed in on television and radio shows, explaining that the tourist faced serious charges for assaulting a royal guard. The penalties could include substantial fines, jail time, and a permanent ban from entering the United Kingdom in the future. "Attacking a member of the royal guard is treated very seriously by British courts," explained a prominent London barrister. "This isn't just a simple assault case. It's an attack on a representative of the Crown, which carries enhanced penalties under British law." The palace issued a brief official statement supporting their guards' actions. "Our security personnel are trained to protect themselves and maintain order while performing their duties." The guard in question followed proper protocol when faced with a physical assault. Social media users began sharing their own stories of witnessing disrespectful tourist behavior at royal sites. Many praised the professionalism of the guards and expressed frustration with visitors who treated them as entertainment rather than working military personnel. International news picked up the story, with outlets around the world covering the incident. The footage was shown on television networks from Australia to Canada, making Michael briefly famous across the globe. Most international coverage was sympathetic to the guard's position. Tourism experts worried that the incident might discourage some visitors, but early indicators suggested the opposite effect. Many people expressed increased interest in visiting London to see the famous guards, now that they understood these were serious military personnel, rather than just ceremonial figures. The story also sparked discussions about tourist behavior more broadly. Travel bloggers and cultural commentators used the incident to remind travelers about respecting local customs and authorities when visiting foreign countries. Michael's commanding officers reviewed the incident thoroughly, examining witness statements, security footage, and the phone videos posted online. Their conclusion was unanimous. The guard had acted appropriately and professionally throughout the encounter. Sergeant Thompson showed exemplary restraint and judgment, his commanding officer wrote in the official report. He gave multiple warnings before using force, and his response was proportionate to the threat he faced. His actions reflect well on the regiment and the Royal Guard tradition. The incident became a training example for new guards, showing how to handle aggressive tourists while maintaining professional standards. It demonstrated the importance of staying calm under pressure and responding appropriately when diplomatic solutions failed. 3 days after the incident, the drunk tourist appeared in Westminster Magistrates' Court for his preliminary hearing. His face was still swollen, and he wore a temporary dental appliance to cover the gap where his tooth had been. He looked considerably different from the cocky aggressor seen in the viral videos. The magistrate reviewed the charges against him: assault on a police officer, drunk and disorderly conduct, and trespassing on royal property. Each charge carried serious penalties, and the combination could result in months of imprisonment and thousands of pounds in fines. His court-appointed solicitor tried to argue that the punch had been excessive force, but the magistrate quickly dismissed this claim after reviewing the video evidence. The defendant clearly initiated physical contact, the magistrate stated firmly. The guard's response was both legal and proportionate to the threat. Media representatives packed the courtroom, eager to cover the conclusion of the story that had captivated international attention. Sketch artists worked frantically to capture the defendant's appearance, since photography was prohibited in the courtroom. The tourist's family had flown in from his home country, looking embarrassed and ashamed of their relative's behavior. His mother sat in the gallery with tears in her eyes, while his father refused to make eye contact with reporters who tried to approach them for comments. During the hearing, prosecutors played the clearest video footage of the incident. The courtroom watched in silence as the drunk man's aggressive behavior escalated from verbal taunts to physical assault. When Michael's perfectly timed counterpunch landed, several people in the gallery audibly gasped. This case serves as a clear reminder that actions have consequences, the prosecutor stated during her opening remarks. The defendant chose to assault a member of Her Majesty's Royal Guard while intoxicated, and he must face the full consequences of that choice. The defense solicitor had few options available. The video evidence was overwhelming, and dozens of witnesses had provided consistent statements about the incident. His only strategy was to emphasize his client's intoxication and ask for leniency based on his lack of previous criminal record. "My client deeply regrets his actions," the solicitor pleaded. "He was heavily intoxicated and not thinking clearly. He has already suffered significant consequences, including permanent dental damage and public humiliation. We ask the court to consider these factors when determining his sentence." The magistrate was not impressed by this argument. "Intoxication is not an excuse for criminal behavior," she responded sternly. "If anything, it demonstrates poor judgment and a lack of self-control that makes the defendant a danger to public safety." Several character witnesses testified on behalf of the tourist, describing him as normally peaceful and law-abiding. His employer back home had provided a letter stating that he was a reliable worker who had never shown violent tendencies before this incident. However, these testimonials were overshadowed by the clear video evidence of his aggressive behavior toward Michael. The footage showed him escalating the confrontation repeatedly, despite multiple opportunities to walk away peacefully. During a brief recess, reporters gathered outside the courthouse to interview legal experts about the likely outcome. Most predicted that the tourist would receive a suspended sentence and substantial fines, along with a ban from returning to the United Kingdom. Inside the courtroom, the defendant sat silently as his fate was decided. His swollen jaw served as a constant reminder of his foolish decision to attack a trained military professional. He kept touching the gap where his tooth had been, wincing each time. The magistrate announced that she would deliver her sentence after reviewing all the evidence and testimonies. She emphasized that attacks on royal guards would be treated with the utmost seriousness by British courts, regardless of the defendant's nationality or circumstances. As the hearing concluded, the tourist was released on bail pending sentencing. He left the courthouse through a back exit to avoid the media circus waiting outside, but photographers still managed to capture images of his bruised and swollen face. Michael returned to his regular duties at Buckingham Palace, but his life had changed dramatically since the incident. Tourists now approached his position with notably more respect, and many asked their companions to pose quietly for photos rather than trying to provoke reactions. Fellow guards congratulated him privately during shift changes, praising his handling of the situation. "You showed everyone what we're really about," one colleague told him. "We're not toys or entertainment. We're professional soldiers doing a job." The incident had sparked important conversations within the Royal Guard community about tourist behavior and how to maintain dignity while performing ceremonial duties. Training protocols were updated to include more scenarios involving aggressive or intoxicated visitors. Michael received hundreds of messages of support from around the world through social media and letters sent to the palace. Military veterans especially appreciated his restraint and professionalism, noting that he had given multiple warnings before using force. "As a former Marine, I want to commend your actions," wrote one veteran. "You showed remarkable discipline and only used force when absolutely necessary. That drunk fool learned an expensive lesson about respecting people in uniform." Tourism numbers at the palace actually increased following the incident, with many visitors hoping to see the guard who knocked out the tourist's tooth. This unexpected boost in interest pleased palace officials, who had worried about negative publicity. Local dentists reported an unusual number of inquiries from tourists asking about emergency dental insurance for trips to London. The incident had apparently made some visitors more aware of the potential consequences of aggressive behavior. The story became part of London tour guide narratives, with many guides using it as an example of why tourists should show respect at royal sites. "The guards aren't actors," became a common refrain during palace tours. Michael's family back in Yorkshire felt a mixture of pride and concern about his newfound fame. His mother worried about the attention, while his father, also a military veteran, expressed satisfaction that his son had stood up for himself professionally. The Regimental Museum received requests to display information about the incident, recognizing it as a significant moment in the history of the Royal Guard. Historians noted that it highlighted the dual role of guards as both ceremonial figures and active military personnel. Meanwhile, the tourist spent his remaining time in London dealing with legal proceedings and expensive dental work. His temporary tooth replacement was painful and made eating difficult, serving as a constant reminder of his poor decision-making. His story became a cautionary tale shared in travel forums and social media groups. "Don't be like this guy," became a popular caption for posts about respectful tourist behavior in foreign countries. The incident also influenced other royal guards around the world. Guards at similar ceremonial posts reported that tourists had become more respectful, following the widespread coverage of Michael's response to aggression. Security experts used the case in training materials, praising Michael's escalation management and precise use of force. He gave clear warnings, used minimal necessary force, and immediately returned to normal duties, noted one security consultant. The broader impact extended beyond tourism and security. The incident became a symbol of standing up to bullies and facing consequences for aggressive behavior. Many people saw it as a satisfying example of instant justice. Social media continued to celebrate Michael's actions months after the incident. Memes featuring his stoic expression became popular, often accompanied by captions about the importance of respecting people doing their jobs. The palace gift shop even began selling postcards featuring respectful tourists posing properly with guards, using the incident as an educational opportunity about appropriate behavior at royal sites. Military recruitment officers noted increased interest in Royal Guard positions following the incident, with many young people expressing admiration for the profession and wanting to serve in similar roles. 6 months later, the drunk tourist received his final sentence. a hefty fine equivalent to 3 months' salary, a suspended prison sentence, and a lifetime ban from entering the United Kingdom. The magistrate's ruling made headlines internationally, serving as a strong deterrent to others who might consider similar behavior. This sentence reflects the seriousness with which British courts view attacks on royal guards, the magistrate explained during sentencing. The defendant's actions were unprovoked, aggressive, and showed complete disrespect for British law and customs. The consequences he faces are entirely of his own making. The tourist left the courthouse with his permanent dental implant finally completed, but the financial cost had been enormous. Between legal fees, dental bills, extended accommodation costs, and the court fine, the incident had cost him nearly £20,000, making it possibly the most expensive punch in history. His story became a mandatory part of tourist orientation materials provided by travel companies. Think before you drink campaigns used his experience as a primary example of how vacation behavior could ruin lives and create permanent consequences. Michael continued his distinguished service with the Royal Guard, eventually receiving a commendation for his professional handling of the incident. His commanding officers noted that his actions had enhanced the reputation of the entire regiment and demonstrated the high standards expected of Royal Guards. The video of the incident remained popular on social media years later, regularly resurfacing whenever discussions about tourist behavior or workplace respect emerged. It became a classic example of instant karma that people shared to illustrate the importance of treating others with respect. Educational institutions began using the case in conflict resolution and de-escalation training programs. Michael's measured response, giving warnings, using minimal force, and returning to duties, became a textbook example of professional security response. Tourism industry professionals credited the incident with improving overall visitor behavior at royal sites. Guards reported fewer attempts at harassment or provocation, suggesting that the widely publicized consequences had educated the traveling public about appropriate conduct. The story inspired a children's book about respecting people at work, featuring a character based on Michael who taught young readers about the importance of good behavior in public spaces. The book became popular in schools teaching citizenship and respect. Michael eventually retired from active guard duty and became an instructor, training new recruits in both ceremonial duties and crowd management. He often used his own experience as a teaching tool, emphasizing the importance of patience, professionalism, and appropriate response to threats. The drunk tourist, meanwhile, struggled with the long-term consequences of his actions. His assault conviction affected job prospects and travel opportunities for years to come. He eventually became an advocate for responsible drinking and respectful tourism, sharing his story as a warning to others. Documentary filmmakers created a short film about the incident, focusing on themes of respect, consequences, and the reality behind ceremonial roles. The film was shown at tourism conferences and cultural sensitivity training sessions worldwide. The incident fundamentally changed how royal guards were perceived by the public. No longer seen as mere decorations or photo opportunities, they gained recognition as professional military personnel deserving of respect and capable of defending themselves when necessary. Years later, Michael reflected on how a single moment had transformed his life and career. "I was just doing my job," he often told trainees. But sometimes doing your job means standing up for yourself and maintaining the dignity of your position. That drunk fellow learned an expensive lesson about respect, and hopefully others learned from watching what happened to him. The legacy of that sunny afternoon at Buckingham Palace continued to influence tourist behavior, guard training, and public understanding of the serious responsibilities carried by those who serve in ceremonial military roles. One perfectly timed punch had delivered a message heard around the world about respect, consequences, and the reality that actions always have results.